All right, here we are for another episode of Coffee with the Founder. Got my coffee cup here. Got my coffee inside. And of course, we have another outstanding guest, a friend, a colleague, a true sister, and Kerri Redding joining us. Kerri, listen, we created Coffee with the Founder as a way to introduce the great people in the WPC family, the WPC network, to one another so we can know more about what we do, the work we do, not just at the conference, but when we leave the conference. So we're glad that you can join us. Let's get right to it. Let's get right to talking about you. Let's ask you, who are you and what do you do to get us started?
Okay. Well, as you said, my name is Kerri Redding, Kerri Richardson Redding, and currently I am the CAS Community Service Coordinator and a part-time digital media arts instructor at Washington International School in Washington, D.C.
So now, just for those of us who enjoy technology but have no idea what that means, digital media, can you just give us a sense of what that job entails and how issues of diversity and privilege may factor in reference to your the work you do?
Sure. Well, before arriving at Washington International School, I was an educational technologist in New York City for almost 20 years. And this is in the time when laptops and networking in schools was brand new. I can remember being at a convention in the Javits Center when Steve Jobs walked across the stage and introduced Wi-Fi, and only a third of the crowd understood what was happening, as he was giving a live presentation and he was on the internet at the same time, and he picked up this laptop and he unplugged the cable and he walked across the room and he's still on the internet. And me and several people are freaking out about the possibility of what this means for our lives. And so I was on that growing edge of bringing technology into independent schools, bringing networking, computing classes into independent schools, developing curriculum long before there were degrees in educational technology. I was one of those folks that was out there working with administrators to help people understand why this was important, why it was valid, how we can do it. And so I really enjoyed that ride, but it was an extremely demanding job, 65 plus hours a week. And when I made the transition out of administration, I was looking to be a faculty member again, but I still wanted to work with all of the exciting educational technology initiatives that I was a part of. So my job now, I teach photography, film, and design as one class. I have an advanced photography class. I teach a physical computing and robotics class where we go through various programming languages. And then I have an advanced robotics class as well. And so I get to still play with all of the cool toys, as it were, but as a
Yeah.
faculty member who's not responsible for the network and the administrative side of the technology infrastructure as well.
Now, you mentioned Steve Jobs in the time of, 20 years ago or so when these things were rolling out. And when you read the work
Yeah.
and research about workplace and workplace dynamics in reference to technology, it's one of the areas where it's still relatively white. So what's been your experience with
Yes,
diversity
it
in
is. And male.
technology?
White and male. When I became the director of academic technology at my previous school, I'm going to say probably 17 years ago now, like go back even further, I was one of two women of color, and we were both Black women who were directors of technology at that time. And so all of my colleagues was predominantly male, and it was definitely predominantly white. And so there was a very small subset of us that were people of color. And I actually ended up doing a few presentations at NAIS, the National Association of Independent Schools, about the intersection of educational technology and diversity initiatives, as they were both the two newest initiatives in independent schools since their inception, especially since we understand that many independent schools were formed either over 100 years ago or during the time of Jim Crow to separate certain students and certain populations away from public schools. Those schools, their mission had not changed. They had not had to adopt any new philosophy or infrastructure. diversity, we started with affirmative action, and in the 60s, schools had 1 or 2 or 3. Well, I'm also a product of independent schools in the 80s here in Washington, D.C. My parents, when they met, they were students. When I was a child, they were still students in graduate school. And so my brother and I were in and out of independent schools, depending on my family's finances. So I started off at Georgetown Day School, and then I went to a public school for elementary for a while called Lafayette School. And then in middle school, I was transferred back into independent school. I went to National Cathedral School for Girls, which was, I still say to this day, one of my best educational experiences, however, one of my most scarring emotional experiences, being one of 6 or 8 Black girls in that class, and definitely having a huge socioeconomic divide between us. And then I was transferred back into public school when our finances changed again. Graduated from Woodrow Wilson Senior High School, and then went on to a little Ivy for college and graduate school. But in terms of educational technology, I can remember one of the stories I tell professionally is my school was building a new building, and we were in downtown Brooklyn. And so we were renting a space that was about a block and a half away, and we had to connect the network, right? We had to install the network in the new building, and we had to connect the network to the old building, which meant a connection of phone systems between an analog system and a voice over IP system or a digital voice system, which is creating a hybrid network together. And all of the things we had worked with our contractor were not working. And so we called all of the senior engineers together. So we had senior engineers from 5 different companies that showed up on this day to meet in our network room to talk about this plan, what could be done. All of the engineers were male. I would say 95% of them were white or white presenting. And I am the person who's in charge. I'm the person who's signing the checks. I am also the shortest person in the room and the only woman in the room. My assistant at that time, my assistant director of academic technology, was a very tall male. And when the meeting was called to order, they all looked toward him, and I pulled over a chair and stood on the chair and said, "Hi, I'm the person you've been talking to. My name is Kerri. I'm the person who's coordinating the effort." And the look of shock on people's faces that this was the person that you were talking to, this little Black woman here. Just earlier, someone had said to me, "Dearie, do you think you could get us some coffee?" And I was like, "Oh no, that's not my job. No, that's not my job." So it has been a journey where I can see the parallels between the adaptation of educational technology and communities talking about authentic inclusion, diversity, equity, and social justice. Like I said, there was a subset of us that ended up doing presentations. It was about 2 years, and it was called Diversity in Technology. It was 2 years. It was myself, someone of Latinx descent, and someone from Asian American descent together as a team. And we presented at POCC, we presented at the national conference, at a few regional conferences about this, coming from a change management perspective. This is all about change and how you manage change. And I continue to see that. I've moved regions now, right? I'm not in New York anymore in the New England region. I'm down in the Mid-Atlantic region where I grew up. And I didn't want to make this change. I'll be really honest. I didn't want to be here in Washington, D.C. I had left this area intentionally, looking for a more open and liberal and accepting area. I loved my life in New York City. But finances and family situation made it such that we had to come back. And for 3 years, I was in an active culture shock. I talked about it all the time. I felt like I went back in history. The things that I would say in faculty meetings or to my colleagues, they were like, "Wow, you were so insightful. You really understand this." And I would say, "Oh, no. I've just been talking about this longer than you have. And I've been in a region where people are paying attention to these issues and we're talking about it in a different way." So where I was seen as outspoken or extremely passionate, I was just me. My caliber had not changed, but my threshold for the things I already understood and had overcome, my threshold for other people's, what's the nice word here? Uninformed opinions was less. And so I know that I presented sometimes as an agitator, but I kept saying, this is state the year. I can't believe this is still happening. And what broke my heart the most, and the reason I'm really proud to be a faculty member right now, is when I arrived on my campus, meeting the students who were of color, in particular of African descent. who were experiencing the same microaggressions, racism, and differential treatment from their faculty that I had as a middle school student 30 years ago in the same region was heartbreaking. I
Yeah.
wanted to believe the world had changed. I wanted to believe that we had moved forward. But if it's not something where there's a focus on educating everyone to move forward, then it's just the status quo. You know, the idea that if you don't plan to be anti-racist, that you're just upholding the system, that is exactly what I ran into. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I ran into. So I see that intersection all the time, especially with the digital divide and our resources. I'm extremely privileged to have worked in educational technology and have access to all of this equipment that I could not afford to buy on my own. Okay. That's my family. My parents are both first generation college graduates, both of them non-traditional college graduates. My dad finished college after Vietnam on the GI Bill as an adult person, you know, not a traditional college. And my mom took 7 years to get through college. I'm the first person in my family to have that, you know, residential 4-year college experience at a beautiful New England campus. So there's not intergenerational wealth in my family to support me in that way. I'm lucky that I came out of undergrad with no student loans. That was through some ingenuity on my mom's part around scholarships and grants. I paid my way through graduate school, and I've had to live on what I make ever since. So I see the intersection. I definitely see the intersection, and it breaks my heart right now that so many students in the United States that don't have access will not reap the benefits of disinserting. And I say benefits because there are tremendous benefits that have emerged in this way. Those of us that have access can pull up a YouTube video, can sign up for a free course with Coursera. MIT is offering all of these courses, but you have to have access. You have to have a device. You have to have Wi-Fi. You have to know how to get there, know what you're doing. You know, and if you're in a household of 4 adults or 4 people with 1 computer, how often do you get that? So that divide is huge. I can't wait for the internet to become a public utility like the phone, to leverage some things, but that divide is huge.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about COVID-19 and shelter in place because it feels like if there's a time people need some kind of technology or Wi-Fi access, particularly if they're students, it's now. And I'm wondering, what's your sense of uh, uh, what COVID-19 has told us about our country in reference to technology, access, disparities? We know that there's some horrible things in reference to the healthcare disparities that we're seeing people devastated in very different ways across race and economics. But also, it seems like everybody's saying we're going to be living in a more virtual world now, more virtual access needed, more virtual learning, teaching, learning. What's your sense? How are you feeling about what COVID-19 is telling us in the next 25 years of education, especially when it comes to educational technology?
Well, there's what it's telling us, and then there's what we're listening to and what we care about. Because the stats have been there for a while. Policy has not changed to address those stats and those needs. I won't go into a diatribe about our current Secretary of Education and setting the pace for that. One of the reasons I mean, like I said, I went to public and independent schools, but I've chosen to make my career in independent schools. And there was a lot of feelings about that. My mom was a public school teacher, career public school teacher here in Washington, D.C. Um, and there were a lot of feelings about why I chose to work in independent schools as opposed to public schools. And my feeling was the students who are in independent schools are those that will be the decision makers of tomorrow. And so I want to be able to show them the possibilities and expand their minds so that they can create policies that are more equitable for all of us in the world. The COVID situation, there in the first 2 weeks that this happened, I, like many other educators, got online to try and network, right? There are a couple of groups on Facebook. There's some that have been put together through Twitter. I'm a part of a few Slack networks where everyone was sharing resources about how we're going to handle this, what tools are you using, what is your school providing students, what is the expectation of your faculty, et cetera, and so on. If you work in a school that does not give you as a teacher a laptop to take home and does not pay you a salary where you can afford to buy this for yourself, you don't have access to those networks that I just mentioned. You don't even know they exist out there. If you are a student in a school that does not provide you with a computer or does not provide you with a computer where you have the permissions to install software and to explore on your own, then you are limited in your ability to take advantage of these resources. Now, the cost of computing has come way down, which is fantastic, right? It's come way down. However, for those who may be in a situation where there is one parent, one breadwinner, or two breadwinners, even where they are working for a minimum wage, these things are still a reach. It's expected that everybody has a cell phone. It's expected that you have some sort of access at home. Well, what if all of your access is through your phone company? Everybody in your house uses their phones, right? You bring the school gives you a laptop. How are you going to get on? If we're expecting you to use video, you have to have a certain bandwidth in order to process that. If you think about a life right now without internet at home, how is this so much different than the life of the 1950s when you went home for the summer and you were disconnected from all your friends at school, right? So moving forward, we as a society have to decide what's important. And policy-wise, we have never prioritized children in the way that we should. We've never prioritized education in the way that we should. When the federal government and states look at budgets, what's the first thing to go? We're going to take education money. Nobody ever talks about the defense budget and how much we're spending and what could be taken from there for education. I mean, what is the threat of a well-educated society? What is the promise of a well-educated citizenry? When I was in high school, I hate to sound like I'm old, but I guess I'm older now, right? When I was in high school, we talked a lot about what it meant to be a citizen of this country, and your rights as a citizen. And my parents especially tried to instill in me and my brother our responsibilities as a citizen. Well, are we still doing that in any way, shape, or form where we're teaching young people to care about anybody other than themselves? How will that be reflected in our policies moving forward? If we're going to be, as the medical experts are saying right now, if this is a season that's going to last for at least another 3 or 4 months, and there's the possibility of a recurrence moving forward, this has a direct impact on educational technology policies in education. We have a responsibility. For example, many schools have a program where it's bring your own device, right? And that satisfies the parents because there's less complaints. You buy what you want, we'll figure out how to work with you. But what that does is set the child up for, I can only access what my parents can afford, as opposed to the school leveling the playing field. We're going to get this computer for everyone, right? For some families, that's going to be what they could afford anyway. But for many families, it may be a step up and give access to the student, like me, where their family couldn't afford it, right? Look what I can do now that I have access to all of these things. Look at the skills that I can learn now that I have access to all these things. And so I think it was in Maine, 30 years ago now. I think it was Maine that was one of the first states that decided they were going to give all students a laptop in 6th grade. And one of my colleagues from New York City was hired to be a secretary of education in Maine and to oversee this program where every 6th grader got a laptop. And people were freaking out. 6th graders, they throw their backpacks. The laptops are going to break. What a waste of money. Well, now we would not think of you going to high school without having some device or some access. So I think it's the school's responsibility to provide that. I think educational technology leaders have to think more broadly about the access. A lot of folks who ended up in educational technology and still today make that transition from commercial into education, apply a mindset and a framework of lockdown. I'm only going to allow you to do certain things as opposed to opportunity. I'm going to allow you to explore, and we have set up the mechanisms. Well, you know what? If something happens, we'll just reset that computer and we'll start over. We need that open mindset and the the idea that we want to give our students as many tools as possible and not be afraid of what they can do. Stop trying to limit them and instead let them go. Let them go. Look what we can do. People have already talked about the nature of education changing over the next 20 years with the idea of micro-credentialing and with college being cost prohibitive for so many people. One of the programs, I mean, my school is an international baccalaureate school. We're part of the IB network. And I really believe in the IB in a lot of ways. And one of the programs that they offer, not at my school, but at a local charter school, is the careers program. So while students are in a high school, they're also getting their licensure or being trained for a skill where they can get a job right out of high school. Not saying they won't go to college, but perhaps that's not a necessary track for everyone, especially if we're still pushing the Renaissance liberal education for everyone. Well, what you going to do with that after 4 years? You still have to go to graduate school, right? So we're already starting you off behind the 8 ball. But we need to think of new ways for education, new ways for credentialing. We also need to pay our teachers better. I mean, I am a teacher. I'm in a private school. I don't make nearly as much as I would if I worked at a public school. There are trade-offs. You know, I trade off that bigger salary for different advantages. One of my best friends, who I call my sister, we've known each other since we were in middle school. She works in private schools. So we've been having this concurrent conversation for 25 years. She works in Montgomery County right now. She makes $25,000 more than I do a year. She's a six-figure person. But what she has to deal with in terms of the bureaucracy and the administration, I have so much more freedom, curricular freedom to work with my students, to follow their interests. We are not weighed down by standardized testing. All of our students go on to do very well. But educational technology plays a huge role in this. What they can do, what they can't do, what they have access to. It's going to have even a more central role moving forward around issues of equity and diversity. Because one of the things we've seen is as we shift into distance learning, all of those little microaggressions that used to be able to be monitored by faculty and addressed in person are now happening online in spaces where we, the adults, are not, but the students are. So they're still being harmed in ways. Use technology. And we know this through our studies of technology and mediated communication that people feel emboldened. I mean, just get on Reddit. People feel emboldened to say things they would not say in your face previously. And so how to instill the sense of responsibility and accountability that you are who you are, regardless of where you are. You're responsible for your words and your actions, regardless of where you are, is a different form of character education, something that I think we need to re-centralize moving forward.
So as we get ready to close out, I wanted to ask you a series of questions, what I call lightning round, and ask you to just give me your thoughts just quickly around some of these issues. And I got about 5 or 6 of them. So if you can just give me a quick thought that I can get through those. And then I got a couple other closing questions to ask you. But I was going to ask you about one of the first quick topics is black girl magic. When you hear that, what comes up for you?
It is both deliciously delectable and exciting, and at the same time, I kind of wish it didn't exist. I know that sounds terrible on the one hand, but in the same way, I was raised under this mythos of the strong black woman. You must be strong at all times, which left no room for vulnerability, no room for growth, no room for my full humanity. And it put on me and other women of my generation a false understanding of who we were. In that same way, black girls are magical. I know this. I have godchildren and a niece who I adore. I think about the things that happened for me in my own life when others put it in perspective. I want black girls to thrive in this world. I want them to shine. I want them to be successful. I also want them to have access to their full range of humanity. You know, I don't want them to be pinned as the magical Negro in anybody's story. I want them to be allowed to be exactly who they are, with a full range of emotions and interests, and not need to conform to any stereotype of any sort, right? Whatever she's into, whatever she likes to do, whatever she likes to study, that's awesome because she is a human being.
Yeah. Can you give me your thoughts about virtual learning? It seems oxymoronic to me. What's your opinion when I say, what's your thoughts about virtual learning?
Well, I think we have to work out our nomenclature a little better. Distance learning, virtual worlds. Um, Mediated communication is what we're doing right now. All right. You and I are not sitting in a room together. We're in two different states, several thousand miles away, both in our, respective homes at a computer. This is the piece between us. You only get to see this much of my body. You don't get all my full body language, with all of that. And so it is a different way for humans to communicate because 90% of our communication is visual, not verbal. Um, if we understand that, then we can plan for it in a way where this can be equally as successful as in-person interactions. Human beings, my background is in human development. I have a master's in human development. And so we're social beings by nature. We need other people. We don't thrive well in isolation, which is why it's used as a punishment, right? Solitary in prison, being alone, isolation, we use that as a punishment. The virtual is useful, but it cannot replace our need for actual human interaction in some way. And as we move forward with the pandemic, I mean, we're looking at other countries opening up already and what they're doing around schools and distancing. The American school system, even independent schools, were not set up for the accommodations that they're making in other countries. But we're going to have to figure something out because part of school is socialization, right? Especially in the primary years, which is where I started. It's socialization and learning how to be with other people. And you're not the only little person in the room, and you have to share and how to talk to other people and use your words and don't hit, those types of things. And so this is a useful stopgap for now, right? This has been an emergency situation. Everyone says we're doing distance learning. We're not. We're doing crisis education right now because it was an emergency. If we start the year like this next year, we will have planned and thought about it. That will be a different model. But I think we need to think about the language around this as well, and how it can be effective. It's easier to do with middle and high school and college students. It is much harder to do in early elementary, where they need people and socialization.
Can you talk to me about screen time? What's healthy? What's unhealthy? When you're advising or when you're talking with parents, because I'm assuming you get this a lot, people ask for your opinion or your thoughts about the right amount of screen time. Can you give those of us parents listening to you right now some idea, some of your thoughts about screen time?
Well, I will say this first to you. You notice today that I'm wearing glasses. I do not wear glasses. These are blue light glasses that I bought because I am now spending many hours on the screen, right, to try and protect my eyes. I have noticed a difference wearing these because my job requires me to be online all day. The conversation about screen time pre-pandemic, we have to forget, all right, because your children are now learning online. One of the dangers, if you will, of screen time has to do with brain science and how our brain reacts. And there is a dopamine release, which makes you want to continue to get that joyful feedback loop, which is why it's dangerous for little children, especially, to spend that much time in that isolated feedback loop of dopamine. It deters their ability to maintain communication and reflection. In a pandemic, this is a different thing. Your child has to be on the screen at some point for school. You also need time away from the screen. It's good for your eyes. It's good for your body. When you're on the screen, you blink a lot less, and so you get more dehydrated. After 20 minutes, we all lean in. Our shoulders get stressed. We all lean in. Our muscles get cramped. And so as much time as you can balance doing in-person activities outside in natural light, you should. Everyone's situation is different. And so lots of parents are like, I'm a parenting fail because my kid watches a movie every night. This is a new time. This is unprecedented. We're all trying to figure out how to get through. Using what you understand to apply it to your family situation the best you can is what you can do best for yourself right now. Don't beat yourselves up about it.
Can you talk to me about social media? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. What's your sense of
TikTok?
you talked about, I got TikTok in a separate category right now. So I'm going to come to that next. But seriously, you talked about a different time where parents may have an opinion about social media pre-pandemic, and maybe that has to be adjusted now post-pandemic. What's your sense about the age you should have a social media account? I mean, Facebook, I mean, the way things
Well,
have evolved. Give me some of
according
your
to the
thoughts.
younger generation, right? According to the younger generation, Facebook's for old people, so they're not even bothered with that anymore.
Yeah.
In the early years of educational technology, when social media was new and not the same, ubiquitous phenomenon, a lot of the disciplinary issues that I had to attend to were around children's behavior on these social media networks. I won't name them because it will really date me, because people are like, what's that? These things don't even exist anymore. Okay. However, for those of us that did not grow up with it, it seems like an outside, intrusive, unnecessary piece of social life. However, for the children of today, and this has been true for over a decade, it is a part of the social landscape that they must learn to navigate in some way. In the same way, when cable TV was new, there were the kids who had cable and they were in one conversation, and there were the kids who had just the over-the-air network TV and they were in a different conversation.
Mm.
I don't think that a child, especially under the age of 12, is losing anything by not participating in social media. I do think in the middle and high school years, it's a conversation it's a constant conversation between the parent and the child. Children need privacy, just like they need a door on their rooms. Okay. They need some privacy, but you also want to figure out ways to keep them safe.
Yeah.
At the same time, without breaking their trust. There are all these programs where you can put it on your child's phone and read everything they've ever said. Well, that's an intrusion in the same way you shouldn't have a camera in your child's room.
Yeah.
But you do need to help them navigate a social landscape that we ourselves did not have to navigate. I remember high school is brutal socially. It's brutal. Middle school, high school, especially. I was at a single gender situation. They make teen dramas are still based on all girls schools and what happens, because there's so much that happens. But I don't think that not allowing your child to participate at all is a good solution. In the same way, I don't think that allowing your child to participate without any conversation or without any rules or regulations is a good solution either. There's a safe middle ground, but that depends on you and your family and your ethics and knowing your child in that way as well. I mean, social media has contributed in some ways to saving people's lives, right? I'm thinking about our LG, our queer community. That's what I would say, our queer community, and the children who may be living in places where they have no in-person allies. That online community can save a life.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, children who may be different in any way than what's going on in their high school or their religious community or their small town. You can save a life in that way. At the same time, social media can be extremely dangerous when children experience it in isolation. And they think that the online insults that are coming from people they don't know are real and somehow speaks to their value as a human being. So it needs to be mediated in some way by you, the adults, and never forget that you're the adult in the household. You are the adult. You make the rules in that way. But you can't say no. You can't close the door on it. It is a part of our reality, and it will remain a part of our reality moving forward.
All right. I got a few more. I got to get your quick response on TikTok. You mentioned that. Now, can you just tell us dinosaurs, what is TikTok? And what's your thought about this new platform, which seems to be the latest craze for not just young people?
Oh, um, all of the newer social, new is relative term, newer social media is all a breakout of pieces of Facebook, meaning things we could do, but they're in isolation, right? Instagram is just for photos. TikTok is little videos where people are mimicking one another. My favorite is the TikTok dances that people do. And for me, it's just pure entertainment. I don't participate. I only watch. I think it's hilarious. There will be other new social media, but right now that's primarily what it is. There'll be something new. I mean, when Snapchat was new, people were like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
There'll be something else new tomorrow. That's the one thing you can count on about technology. Something new is coming.
Something new. I know somebody mentioned Peloton or something, not Peloton like the car, but like an app.
I use that. That's for the exercise bike, and they have a treadmill and they have exercise classes online. I'm part of the Peloton network. I
Yeah,
joined the cult a while ago.
yeah. Okay, so what should we be documenting about this time? You know, I wonder. I asked
Ah,
someone on one of our conversations about what parents can do with kids to kind of be in cooperation together, in partnership together during this time, and they mentioned, you know, just recording your time together. You know, so what's your thought, or have you talked to anybody, or you yourself done anything to kind of document the days of quarantine?
there are people who are doing some active documentation projects around this. I gave an optional assignment to my high school photography and film class to do a COVID documentation journal. I know the narrative film teacher in my school is doing a collective movie with his students around this time. There was a school that I thought was really great in their forethought, that when they sent students home, when they closed the buildings, they asked them to keep a daily journal. And I think anything that we can record during this time is useful, because 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it will be a primary source document. When Anne Frank was writing in her journal about her experiences hiding, it wasn't because she was thinking about the future. It was because she was a young girl writing about what was going on in her life then. And that is used as a primary source document in many places today for us to understand what it was like for a young person during that time. So I think anything you can do around documentation around this time is useful. When I have the mental bandwidth to metacognate about this, I have stepped out and done some videos that I've recorded. I haven't published anything yet, but I have stepped out and done some recordings because I think they may be useful in the future. But that's my nature as a documentarian, as a Griot, is to document everything, thinking that it might be useful for someone at some point. But yeah, anything you can do, even if it's just a weekly, this is our family, this is what happened, this is how we're feeling, will be useful.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to partner with you. I really want to think about with your photography class, especially maybe working with some of your students and having the White Privilege Conference be maybe a place and space they can come collect some photos and practice their skill set, and we can do a win-win. So, but also
I would
maybe,
love that.
yeah, capture some video. So let's think about that. But can you tell me quickly what's in your 10-year plan? What do you got planned for the future? And do you have any kind of websites or anything going on that you could tell people about so we could follow your work?
Absolutely. Well, on Twitter, my handle is Nandi Kerri, Nandikeri. I have had that handle on the internet since the internet was GUI, meaning before we were a graphical user interface. I have a very large web presence in that way. I have an educational website, which is richardsonredding.org. That's where I keep my CV and what I'm doing professionally. And then as a photographer, I have a website, which is keredding.com, where I showcase my photography work. I made a choice that I love the arts, but I didn't want it to be my primary gig and how I fed myself. And I love education and work with young people, so I'm a teaching artist. Most of my photography since I've been in Washington, D.C. has been either personal projects, portraiture projects, or I do work for the Smithsonian in the summers. I volunteer for the Folklife Festival. And so I have a deep catalog. Actually, I have it right here of SD cards of projects I want to work on in my spare time when I can manage my own screen time. My 10-year plan at this time is somewhat open, as my family situation has changed. My life plans have changed. My husband and I hoped for children, and that was not in the cards for us. And that takes a lot. As a female person, I had to step out of big jobs and make room and space for that. And also, my husband was sick last year. He overcame bladder cancer. We are so lucky that he was diagnosed in the time he was, because just even a month later, we would have been caught up in the COVID issue with diagnosis. And so he's still in a recovery year. We've given, a full year for him. So until January of next year is a recovery year. And we're just trying to stabilize our finances right now. part of my income comes out of New York City, as I mentioned, and our rental property there. But 10 years from now, I would like to continue working with young people. I would like to be doing something more in the arts. I love what I do in educational technology around programming and robotics, but I would like to make more room for my work with digital storytelling and for work as a Jedi with social justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity in some way. I've never wanted to really lead that effort. I want to be on a team of people that are working together for that. That's the thing I miss, is teamwork in that way. So I would like to still be in the education sphere in some way. Before the pandemic, we were hoping for travel. We were planning for some world travel. I hope that opportunity opens up for us again in terms of world travel. I love what I'm doing with the International Baccalaureate. I'm a big, hungry brain, so I need to be reading and inputting and learning all the time, even more so now, I feel. So 10 years from now, I hope to still be healthy and to still be contributing in some way to the education space and to the arts space, to continue to tell stories that show that people who look like me and my brother and my husband and my family have full humanity in the same way that we've seen in our mainstream media for the last 85 years. I hope that the landscape is changed so that students in independent schools are not suffering in the way that I suffered through microaggressions and social understanding. I'm hoping to work with a team of people. I'm looking for some new opportunities. So, you know, we plan, God laughs. I've learned that lesson many times. So I'm going to say I'm open to many things. I'm easily accessible on social media. I'm easy to find. And yeah, I hope to continue growing, learning, storytelling, documenting, and and contributing in some positive way to a positive change in our society that makes it more equal and equitable for everyone.
Well, thank you, Kerri Redding. I definitely want to visually give you some open arms from the White Privilege Conference,
Yay!
the Privilege
Hugs.
Institute, because I think we are continuing to think about ways to document the conference experience through video and photography. And so I'd love to talk about maybe being in partnership with yourself and your students. I think we could create a real win-win project for at least the next 5 years. And so we'll definitely be in touch with you around that.
Absolutely.
So much great insight and fun and knowledge you've given us today. I want to close out by asking one last question. We've been collecting what to watch, what to read or listen to. Is there anything you've been watching, reading, listening to that you would add to our list of what to do while you're shelter in place? Any show that you've learned something from, or anything you've read or listened to, or something that's just taken you away?
Okay, well, the thing that takes me away, that one's easy, because I'm rewatching the series now, Once Upon a Time, which is all about fairy tale creatures that are caught in the real world through a curse. It is excellent storytelling, and I really enjoy that. So that's the easy takeaway part. This is what I've been reading slowly. It's a book called My Grandmother's Hands, which is about epigenetic trauma and how to heal. Oh, you've got it too!
I just got my copy from Brother Resma, who is a phenomenal brother, and I'm waiting to dive into this. Yes. Thank you. I heard about that.
So yeah, I was reading that. I'm a big sci-fi person. So I finished this last week and I'm waiting for the next one to come. This is a sci-fi novel, Binti. This author is a Hugo and Nebula award-winning author, an African-American woman, and they just picked her series up for a Hulu production, which I'm thrilled about. I've been rereading some Octavia Butler. Like I said, I'm a sci-fi person, like in my heart. But when I'm working and have the bandwidth, I've been re-listening to Oprah's masterclasses she has podcasts on masterclasses, that, and also The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That's a book I go back to pretty regularly as it grounds me and reminds me of some really important things. So that's the read, watch, listen to list right now.
Those are some good nuggets you've given us. Kerri Redding, you take care of yourself there in the DC area. We'll look forward to being in touch, and we appreciate the time and the knowledge. Wishing you peace, wishing you love, wishing you soul. Appreciate you, sister.
That's an end of Soul Train. That's awesome. Thanks, Seti. Nice to see you as always, Dr. Moore.
Nice to see you. Yeah.